In 2017, the Tesla Model 3 became available to customers and it quickly became a fan favourite. But regardless if you're a Tesla fan or not, the vehicle itself became a worldwide success after it surpassed the Nissan Leaf in 2020 in becoming the world's best-selling plug-in electric vehicle. Indeed, the Model 3 is popular among a lot of consumers, but in 2021 you've got quite a few different options that you might want to consider. Specifically for those of us who live in the UK and Europe, there's some other tempting propositions. So in this review, we're going to be seeing if the 2021 Tesla Model 3 is worth your money, and furthermore how it compares to some of its all-electric rivals. Now, if you'd like a detailed comparison between the different trim levels, or indeed a little bit of a breakdown of the different competitors that are now in the market, do check out our written review. Will be down in the description below. Also down there you'll find links to our social media platforms, so we very much appreciate a follow. And it goes without saying, if you want to keep up with the reviews from TotallyEV, definitely do subscribe and hit that bell notification. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about something quite subjective, and that's its exterior design. Now initially I wasn't too taken away by the overall aesthetics of the Model 3, however it's certainly grown on me. From the front you've got this Aston Martin-esque type of look with kind of flared headlights and a slightly dipped bonnet. As for the rear of the vehicle, it's got its own identity. Now in terms of the spoiler, it's kind of built in. It's not only added for extra drag coefficient and aerodynamic efficiency, but it also does give a little bit of a sporty flair. Now speaking of which, at the side profile, Tesla very much looked at the overall drag coefficient in order to reduce kind of things that are protruding from the vehicle. So starting off with the door handles, they're built into the door frame and therefore might take a little bit getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. As for the rims, they're available in 18, 19 and 20 inch sizes. That's of course depending on the trim level you go for, but for the long range, or let's say the standard range plus models, you'll get 18 inch aero rims as standard, and in my opinion they actually don't look too bad either. Now moving inside the vehicle, Tesla has opted for a very minimalist type of design, and here it's 15.4 inch display that's planted at the center of the dashboard takes center stage, and we'll touch upon tech in just a bit. But I do like the fact that Tesla has opted for a leather-free vegan upholstery, and it can come in an all-black finish. If however you go for the white finish that we've got, it'll cost around £1,000 as an additional option, but does bring in quite an additional amount of light. In other words, it kind of makes it feel a bit lighter in terms of the interior, which is very much needed for a country like in the UK. Now as for the glass roof as well, it comes as standard, which is nice, and does block out pretty much 99% of sun rays, so you're not going to get a suntan while sitting at the back or the front of the vehicle. Now in terms of its minimalist design, there's some pros whereby you haven't got too many distractions or too many buttons around crowding your field of vision. However, there's some cons as well, and for someone who lives in the UK, the wiper controls are the thing which actually really stood out for me. They are actuated by pressing a button on the left hand stalk. Now if you want to adjust the speed, you're going to have to go on the infotainment system and adjust the speed over there. There's no means of adjusting it directly from the button or the stalk that's found as you would normally expect on most traditional vehicles. I feel that Tesla could address this via firmware updates, but at the time of making this video, that's a limitation that I found, at least living in the UK. As for the right hand stalk, again in the UK, it allows you to go through the different drive modes, so drive, neutral, and go into reverse or park by pressing on the button. You can also initiate cruise control or autopilot if you were to shift down, and we'll touch upon this in the driving section. As for the buttons on the steering wheel, they're initiated all via these scroll wheels, which are very well positioned. However, for you to actuate, let's say, the right and left functions, so for example if you're flicking between different songs via your media, then what you'll find is means to be a little bit awkward to press the button, because the scroll wheels don't protrude as much as I would like them to do to make them quite practical. Now a big point for me however is the fact that the Tesla Model 3 does not have an instrument cluster, nor does it have an option to have a head-up display. While this might potentially come out in the future, at the time of doing this review this is not the case, and therefore if you want to see your speed you have to glance at the top right hand side of your display, which means that it takes your eyes off the road and makes it a little less intuitive, specifically if you come from an ICE based vehicle. So now we get onto the 15.4 inch display, which is planted on the center of the dashboard. And first off, I do want to talk about Google Maps, because the Tesla uses Google data, although I did find there's quite a bit of discrepancy between the built-in Google Maps and my Android phone that was running Google Maps, to the point where there was about a 40-minute difference on a longer drive. Your mileage may vary, but in my case I actually resorted to using my phone as my navigation, and it's quite a shame because the Tesla Model 3 does not support Android Auto, nor does it support Apple CarPlay. Now I'm just going to walk you through some of the features of the Model 3's display over here, because I think it's really comprehensive and is fundamental in terms of you using the Tesla Model 3 and potentially you considering to buy it in the first place. On the right hand side you can see there's some quick functions in order for you to open up certain things. So for example, the charging flap and the rear trunk can be opened electronically because they've got electronically hydraulics, and then in the front you can only open it but then you can't close it. You will need to close it manually. Now as for the driving mode, if you go into drive you can see the menu changes over here, and as I referenced before, this is where your instrument cluster is effectively. You've got your speedometer and the speed of where you're driving, and if you were to swipe across you can see in terms of bar and PSI, and then in terms of a trip indicator. So now let's talk about the bottom bar that's integrated over here, and I really feel that Tesla have really thought out in terms of the positioning, from the media key being furthest away from the driver so your passenger can easily access it, to the fact that you've got climate controls planted at the center. Now speaking of which, the climate controls are quite visually appealing, as you might be able to see over here, and you can customize it in terms of how it acts. Now I should also mention, in terms of the footwell, I did find it to be a bit hit and miss in terms of how it actuates, and you can see over here it's somewhat actuating the one on the left hand side when in reality it should be doing my feet. I find this is a bit of a software bug, and I think Tesla are looking to fix this, but looking at the forums and in terms of Tesla owners, they've also reported similar problems, to the point where their feet get quite cold or quite warm depending on where you live, and in my case my feet got quite cold on a long drive in the UK. Now speaking about heat, you've got 5 different ways of heating your seats, and yes, that includes the middle seat, which is quite surprising. So therefore you can heat all 5 seats independently, and you've got 3 levels per mode, and furthermore you can also heat your steering wheel if you so wish, and have a quick off button as well. You can do this via the app, and I'll show you that in just a bit as well. There is also the dog mode, and as the dog mode might suggest, it is made for pets that are sitting inside the vehicle, and as you might be able to see, there is a dog enjoying the terms of climate, and means that you can effectively leave your pets in your car and not have to worry about them running out of air, which is a nice little touch. Now switching off the climate controls, if we go back over here you can see there's a few different functions, and I want to touch upon in terms of the little button over here that brings it up. So over here you can see calls, calendar, camera, which the camera will touch upon in the safety and security of this of the vehicle. But you've got the energy indicator, which gives you a little rough indication as to how you've been driving. Ignore the range projections over here because they're going to be a little bit skewed. And then you've got your charging, as for how much range you've got, and you can set a limit as to how much you want to drive and therefore preserve a bit of the battery. And then you've got your web in terms of accessing a browser, and then you've got the entertainment, which I actually personally really love. As someone who's a bit of a gamer and a little bit of a geek, I quite like the fact that Beach Buggy Racing 2 really reminds me of Lego Racers / Mario Kart. You can even play it with your steering wheel and your brake pedal. Of course, you're going to have to be at a standstill and in park, so therefore it's not going to mean that when you're on the road you can actually use these functions, but it's just really nice to see that these games are integrated, and there's quite a few different games for you to choose from. On the subject of entertainment, there's also the theatre mode, which allows you to access Netflix and YouTube and Twitch, for example, and furthermore there's different services that can be integrated in the future. As for that, there is also a toy box, and the toy box is quite hilarious. You can have an emissions testing mode, which I find is quite funny. I think Tesla have done this for a reason in terms of calling emissions testing mode. You can even have like a whoopee cushion sound placed throughout the different seats. It's just quite fun, and these little things over here just kind of show that not only Tesla has a sense of humor, but will want to kind of bring a little bit of joy into your life, specifically if you own the Tesla Model 3. Past that, in terms of the toy box, then you've got a little bit more serious functions, and that is to do with the wiper controls. Now the wiper controls over here, as I mentioned before, will pop up. So if I press the button in terms of my wiper, you can see it pops up instantaneously. If you were to click it, you can see the different functions and the speed of the wiper, and of course you can set it to auto. A little note over here, I did find that the auto mode doesn't seem to be that well done, and from again reading on Tesla forums, it seems like people have also complained about the fact of the auto mode doesn't seem to be as well intuitive in comparison to other systems out there from other manufacturers. Now in terms of the overall entertainment, there is also the music. Now if you were to press this a few times, if you have music playing, it will pop up your screen, but you can also scroll up from here or scroll up directly in terms of if you've popped it up over here, scroll up from the middle of the screen. Now you can see you've got radio, phone, Spotify, karaoke and TuneIn. Some of these will be part of an option, so they might not be available, but ultimately what you should know is that the vehicle does have Bluetooth support and also USB playback support. Now on the subject of that, if you're interested in a detailed review of the audio system itself, do check it up on your pop-up banner or in the description below, where I go into a lot of detail of the premium audio system that's comprised within the Model 3. I must say, as a nutshell, that it's absolutely spectacular and among one of the best systems I've heard to date. But as I said, check it up on your pop-up banner for more details about that. Now moving past that, we've then got the vehicle settings, which you can access by pressing the little car icon. And here you've got quick controls, you've got customizations for example, your locks, your lights, how the display will act in terms of the brightness. You can have a screen cleaning mode if you want. The driving mode is quite important for those people who obviously want to customize how the driving experience is. As for the roll and hold or creep mode, I personally love hold because it uses regenerative braking and therefore means that it comes to a little bit of abrupt hold and means that you can have effectively a one-pedal driving approach, and we'll touch upon this in the regenerative braking section of this review. Then you've got autopilot if you were to go for the option, and we'll touch upon this later as well. And navigations, as I mentioned before in terms of the Google Maps, as you can see I had online routing enabled, and despite that fact it still didn't do a great job. So again, your mileage may vary depending on where you live. Safety and security, service, and then software. Now software is very important because it is very much an advanced system, and one of the key selling points of the Tesla vehicles on the whole, not only the Model 3, is the fact that you get over-the-air updates. And in my case, I got a recent release and it added some minor bug fixes. I'm not sure if it's going to load because the internet connectivity in my area is terrible, but effectively allows you to update your system. Now finally, I should also mention in terms of this settings menu that you've got a glove box button. If I press it, it will open the glove box. Maybe you might have heard it in the background, but it does open electronically, so there's no physical button. However, if you want to close it, you'll have to manually close it. There's no electronic button, it only just releases a latch. Now, I should also mention there is another function that some people will be interested about, and that's to do with the dash cam. This does save data in terms of your dash cam, and in this respect means that you can see your surroundings. So for example, this is a save footage that I had. You can see where it was saved, and you can see it uses the cameras left, right, rear, and of course your front in order for you to see all the different angles. And this can be useful in terms of an event of a crash or someone hitting you or something like that, or even an event happening. It's really nice that you can actually have this enabled. Now this also is working simultaneously with Sentry mode, and Sentry mode is effectively when you walk away from the vehicle and you want your vehicle to be kind of protected from thieves, for example, or someone trying to break into the vehicle. Sentry mode will initiate the cameras, and I did test it out myself and I did find that it does actually pick up exactly what it says. So if someone is around the vehicle, it will automatically record them in case they were to cause any damage to your car. Now on the subject of technology, you've got the Tesla app. Now you don't have to use it if you don't wish, specifically when it comes to accessing the vehicle, because you can use the NFC card instead to tap it on the B pillar of the vehicle to access it and indeed drive the vehicle. And if you want, instead, you can buy a wireless key fob as you would normally expect with a regular vehicle. But instead, Tesla actually wants you to use the app because there's a variety of different functions which are available here. For example, you can unlock or lock it remotely at any point. So if I were to unlock it over here, you can see it instantaneously accesses it. And this is communicated by Bluetooth, by the way. There's the front trunk, which can be also accessed. And you can see over here, if you do open it, you're going to have to physically close it because there's no electronically adjustable front trunk. You can also adjust the climate, so you can turn on the climate controls directly via that button, and if you want to see what it's doing, you can go via this tab and adjust the temperature, for example, or indeed adjust, let's say, if you want the seats to be warm as well before you're entering. Now elsewhere you've got the location, which will show you where the car is. For example, if you've lost it, then you've got the summon feature. Now the summon feature in the UK or in Europe, due to regulations, is limited. So really, if you're going to use it, you want to use the forward and reverse function, and you might use this if you're in a very tight parking spot. So for example, if you're tight against the wall. Now you can activate it by holding down and pressing it. What you'll be able to see hopefully in the background is the car does move, but I am very close to the vehicle. I mean, I'm about 2 meters away, if that. Now, if you are to be at a further distance, you'll find that these features are very much limited and don't really work. And the smart summon feature is pretty much left redundant, at least again in the UK or in Europe. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that you will want to enable, let's say, fingerprint authentication via the app itself, or for example, have a very comprehensive set of identifications for your phone. So in other words, have biometric security alongside a PIN. Now the Tesla can have a PIN authentication before driving. So if you are prone to losing your smartphone and for some reason someone has access to your biometric security or for example has your PIN, then you can set a separate PIN via the car's infotainment system in order to protect that from happening. Now with a very minimalist type of design, one might think that there's very limited amount of storage space throughout the cabin, but that's not the case. First off, you've got 2 wireless charging pads which are propped underneath the dashboard, and this means that you can wirelessly charge your smartphone or indeed place them over here, and it also supports fast charging as well. Now if you want to plug in your smartphone, there's 2 Type-C ports found within a large compartment storage, and this is found underneath a retractable type of bay. Now the retractable bay itself is actually quite nice because it's a definite update over the previous iterations of the Model 3, which had a kind of flip out design instead. Furthermore, the storage compartment here is large enough to fit, let's say, a small size water bottle, a larger size purse, or indeed a wallet. Now, if you want more storage, there's also some found underneath the center armrest, which again allow you plenty of place to put, let's say, your valuables. And furthermore, there's a 12-volt socket over here as well. If you want to, let's say, integrate a dash cam or something else you want to charge via that, you can do so via that plug. Now, the 2 cup holder spaces are not adjustable, which is slightly a shame. So if you've got smaller size cups, for example, they'll wobble about. So you'll want to bear that in mind, specifically given the amount of acceleration you've got with the Tesla Model 3. But you do have these largest compartment bays found within each of the front doors, which will be plentiful for, let's say, 500 milliliter bottles, or for example, larger size valuables as well. Now, as for the back of the cabin, you've got some storage compartments found within the doors, and they're actually quite large to the point that you can fit a 500 milliliter bottle as well. There is also 2 cup holder spaces found within the center armrest, although they're a little bit inconvenient if you're going to be putting your hand over here, and especially if you've got a larger sized hand, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable for longer distance drives, but nevertheless it's nice to see that Tesla has integrated the option. And yes, as you might have guessed, the middle seat can be used as a middle seat and therefore can seat up to 5 occupants. Now when it comes to the actual seating comfort, the seats themselves, excluding the middle one, is actually really soft, and even at the rear of the cabin it's actually quite surprising. I would say it's kind of like for like with the Nissan Leaf here. Now when it comes to headroom, I'm just under 6 foot, and I must say it's not super tight, but if you're going to be 6'4", you're going to struggle to sit at the back of the cabin. Specifically when it comes to legroom. Now legroom is plentiful, but due to the seating design, it means that you're kind of sat at an angle, and therefore your knees are a little bit higher than your waist, and therefore means that on longer distance drives you'll feel a little bit of discomfort, specifically in your quad or your calf muscles. Now as for the front, it's really nice to see fully electrically adjustable seats both on the passenger and the driver side, and here you can find the right sort of comfort, and you've also got lumbar support as well. Now elsewhere, when it comes to practicality, each of the 4 doors have an electronic button which initiates the door release. This allows you to quickly get in or out of the vehicle, and if you're at the front you can also opt for a manual lever instead. What I like over here is just it's really easy to open a door and means that you don't have to put too much effort into it. Now in terms of the boot, there's 3 ways of operating it: via the app, or via the infotainment system, or via a physical button found at the back, and as you can see it's electronically adjustable. Now there are certain settings that you can adjust, in other words of how large it opens, but for most people I think the largest setting is what you're going to want to use. But even at its highest point, I feel it's not as practical as the likes of the VW ID3 or the Polestar 2, whereby someone who's just under 6 foot, I feel that my head is almost going to hit it. Now you can push it up a little bit more, but you have to do that each time you open up the trunk, and to me that's a little bit impractical. Now on the plus side, in terms of the usable storage space at the rear of the vehicle, you've got 375 litres, and at the front of the vehicle you've also got a further 50 litres. That's plenty of room for you to use at the front of the vehicle, allowing you to even store, let's say, shopping or even a small sized luggage. Now for the rear of the vehicle, if you were to prop down the seats, the figure extends up to 1,235 litres, although that figure is not official and not quoted by Tesla. Now what I do like is the fact that you do have underfloor storage compartment, which is actually quite large. You can again place larger size bags or even your charging cables if you so wish to have them. As for the side of the trunk as well, you've got a little storage compartment as well there. What I'm trying to say over here is that while it's not as practical in terms of design in comparison to some of its competitors, it still offers you plenty of usable storage space and arguably one of the largest storage capacities when you combine the front and rear of the vehicle. And so now we get on to driving, and first off I do have to talk about cabin noise, as we're going to be approaching the motorway over here. It'll allow you to hear a little bit more of the road noise that is present in the vehicle. Now I should say that in comparison to some of its competitors, it's actually pretty decent at giving you passive noise isolation, and here the vehicle does a decent job of trying to cancel the noise around you, like for example the motorbike that's in front of it, or should I say the moped. But when it comes to road noise, you do hear a little bit of road noise that creeps in from the tyres, and of course that could change depending on the tyres, depending on the condition that you're in, and furthermore in terms of how and where you're driving. So for example, if you're driving on smoother routes or let's say harsher routes, you'll find that there is a difference and a discrepancy. But all I will say is, having driven on the motorway quite substantially with the Tesla Model 3 and around country roads and indeed in more urban environments, I'll say that the Model 3 is perfectly well insulated, and furthermore if you put some music on, then you're really not going to hear too much of the noise around you. Now while cabin noise is important, there is of course handling characteristics which do play a massive part when it comes to driving a vehicle, specifically an EV in comparison to a regular ICE based vehicle. Now here I was actually pleasantly surprised, and that's actually due to the weight distribution. The Tesla Model 3 long range and the performance AWD models have effectively got a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which means that when you're chucking around country roads, you're going to feel that the car does handle really well and grips it quite well as well. Given the way that the batteries are laid out at the floor of the vehicle too, it means that, well, you just feel that you're quite planted to the ground. And while it will feel heavier than a regular ICE based vehicle, on the whole, I think most people will be actually pleasantly surprised and have a joyous experience when driving. Now I should mention on that note, the steering wheel itself is very nimble and is extremely responsive to slight inputs, which makes it feel almost like a racing car. But at the same time, if you don't want that and you don't want to have it on its stiffer or medium sort of segments, then you can have it in terms of a chill steering wheel, and therefore allows you to have a bit more of a easier driving experience, specifically when you're going in and around town. So while that's all well and good, what about in terms of raw performance? Well, here the numbers aren't actually officially quoted by Tesla. If you look at the owner's manual, and there'll be a pop-up on your screen right now, you can see the different motors in terms of how much they actually output, but there's no combined figure. And if you look on Tesla's website as well, there's no mention of the total kilowatts or horsepower equivalent, and indeed, let's say, the torque figure. Now you can add it up, and therefore you'll hit around 400-ish horsepower and 500 horsepower on the AWD models respectively in terms of the long range and performance model. And likewise in terms of torque figures, well, you're going to be hitting over 400 Newton meters of torque. Now regardless of the actual figures, the most important thing is actually the actual feel of it and how well it performs. And here, as I mentioned before, in terms of its handling characteristic, it's excellent. But when you actually come to drive it, and even if you launch it from a standstill to 60 miles an hour, you'll find that the vehicle gets from 0 to 60 in 4.41 seconds, which is insanely fast. Now before you slam me, and specifically for those people out there who are Tesla fans, yes, you can get it faster, specifically with the long-range AWD model. However, in my tests, which I always do in the same way, I found that this figure was 4.41, and even though Tesla claimed 4.2, I'm sure you can get it to that figure, if not a bit lower, but realistically, who really cares about the 10th second, specifically if you're going to be driving at a regular speed or going around country roads? Frankly, all I'm trying to say over here is the car is excellent and very, very nippy, and will definitely bring a smile to anyone's face, be it if you're an electric fan or not. I think driving the Tesla Model 3 is an absolutely joyous drive. Now, as for top speeds, the standard range plus gets to 140 miles an hour, the long range AWD gets to 145 miles an hour, while the sports, or shall I say performance model, gets up to 162 miles an hour, which means that it's, well, going to be plenty fast and isn't limited to, let's say, 80 or 90 miles an hour like, let's say, some of the hybrid vehicles out there on the market, or indeed some of the all-electric vehicles. Are you ever going to hit these figures? Probably not. Unless you live in Germany and you have the Autobahn at your disposal, I don't see many people actually hitting the top speed figures. But it's just good to know that you have that large amount of power at your disposal, and the fact that you're not really truly limited in terms of that. Now, while the performance figures, 0 to 60, handling characteristics are very important, specifically for someone like myself who actually enjoys driving, I must say the biggest selling point for this vehicle is its electric range. Now, Tesla is kind of renowned for its battery technology and was among the first to actually really pioneer EVs in the consumer world. And here the Tesla Model 3 long-range AWD achieves a staggering 310 miles in our tests. Now, our tests are comprised of motorway driving, country road driving, city road driving, normal usage with your climate controls and infotainment system blaring out, just your regular drive. And here 310 miles is a class-leading figure, to the point that it's actually the best figure that we've tested on any EV to date, and that includes from the likes of the Polestar 2, the Renault Zoe, the Nissan Leaf, the VW ID3, and bigger vehicles such as the Kia e-Niro, the Hyundai Kona Electric, the Audi e-tron. You can see we've tested a lot of vehicles, and in this respect still the Tesla Model 3 saloon 4-door vehicle does a better job than all of these vehicles combined. Now, aside from its electric range, another key point is, of course, plugging it in and charging it. And here the Tesla Model 3 has the access to the Tesla supercharger network, and here in the UK you can get up to 250 kilowatts of input, which means that you can recharge very, very quickly. Now, in my case, I saw up to an input of 163 kilowatts at London Gatwick Airport. Even though I was using the Tesla supercharger V3, I didn't see the 250 kilowatts that was claimed by Tesla. Now, this depends in terms of your overall outside climate, how the battery's been preconditioned, and of course how many people are charging at the charge point. Now, aside from charging at a charge point, you can of course use regenerative braking. Now, as I mentioned before, there are some 3 settings that you can use through the infotainment system, and I quite like using the hold function. So you might be able to see right now, in terms of me driving, if I were to just go and then to release, you can see it just can come to a complete standstill. And it's actually pretty good when you're going at speed as well. You can feel the regenerative braking pretty harshly. It does take some getting used to, but it does effectively mean that you can have a one-pedal driving approach. The only thing that I feel that Tesla have kind of, not say missed a trick on, but it would be nice to see a few different levels of regenerative braking. You only have it as off or on, as far as I'm aware. There's no like level 2 or level 3 that you can opt for, at which point it would make it maybe a little bit less harsh for those people using it for the first time and getting to grips with an electric vehicle for the first time, or indeed for those people who just don't want to have such a harsh regenerative braking but equally do want to recoup some energy back into the battery pack. Now, for someone like myself who likes that harsh feel, I must say I've really had a fantastic experience having kind of a one-pedal driving approach. Now, another very important factor is safety, and here the Tesla Model 3 scored 5 out of 5 on Euro NCAP's 2019 tests, and it just shows that the vehicle will be capable of taking a heavy impact, and both for adult and child occupants it scored very highly. But aside from serious crash, what about in terms of your normal everyday usage? Well, the Tesla Model 3 is one of the most advanced systems out there on the market, be it if you go for the Autopilot package or not, which includes the likes of auto steer, or indeed if you're going to be changing lanes on the motorway, it can even steer for you. the likes of adaptive cruise control are one of the best I've ever come across. And I must say, it should be commended as to what Tesla have been able to achieve over here. So you'll be able to see on your screen that the vehicle is picking up loads of different things, from the different vehicle types to where they're positioned, to the lines, and even picking up sometimes if it's a, let's say rubbish bin, or even if there's traffic cones on the side. It's super intelligent and keeps you quite vigilant, and if you take your eyes off the road, it means that it's going to alert you. Now, I should mention, in terms of autopilot, if it's actually worth it in the UK or not, well, it just really depends in terms of your usage. If you're someone who's going to be driving on the motorway quite a lot, and you're doing that for, let's say, work purposes or indeed for commutes, then what you'll find here is that the autopilot function does take a little bit of the stress away from driving on longer distance trips, which might seem a little bit mundane. But on roads which are not as well marked, or let's say if you're driving in and around the city, at the time of doing this video, the autopilot feature doesn't really work, and furthermore doesn't really improve safety. If anything, at certain times I felt that the safety features almost felt a little bit counterintuitive, where the vehicle would try and steer you towards, let's say, the side of a car, or sometimes the side of a pavement, because it didn't quite see the road markings ending, or let's say the roads merging, and as a result meant that it just was a frightening experience when the wheel is kind of dragging you to one side, and you know for full well that that's not where the car should be heading. Which really does lead me on to my next point, and that's generally in terms of autopilot on the whole. I saw recently in the news that people had died because they were sitting in the back and letting autopilot do its thing. That is really not the case of what any autopilot system, be it for Tesla or not, is supposed to do. It's supposed to make your driving experience a little bit better, and while systems will become more advanced in the future when it comes to, in terms of fully autonomous driving, I must say at the current stage you do really have to be paying attention to the road in front of you and your surroundings. The same could be said about when it comes to its auto park function. While it's very, very cool to have your hands completely off the wheel and for you to just let the car do its thing and park, it still does require you to be vigilant, and even Tesla do say it is your responsibility, if the car were to hit something, that you are going to be forking out the bill. While our systems are here to help you, it doesn't mean that you can just be a complete pedestrian while you are behind the wheel. So yes, the systems are there to help you, and yes, they are one of the most advanced systems out there on the market, and I must say I was very impressed with adaptive cruise control, specifically for those of us who live in the UK or Europe. But when it comes to actually paying attention, this is fundamental to any vehicle, and I can't stress it enough that you must be paying attention at all times, even when you are doing a basic parking maneuver. Now, on the subject of parking, I should mention visibility. Now, at the rear I do find it a little bit limited, and I think it's because of the shape of the vehicle. It kind of stretches up, and therefore means that it's a little bit harder to see your rear view. The plus side is that you've got some fantastic cameras that are included as standard on every Model 3, and therefore you've got a rear and side view cameras which will give you a good indication of the things around you. Of course, if you're not accustomed to cameras, it might take a little bit getting used to, specifically when it comes to spatial awareness, but once you get the hang of it, what you'll find is the cameras do kind of replace the fact of you having to look physically through your windows in order for you to work out if it's safe or not to make a certain parking spot. Now, on a more negative note, however, and something that really can't be changed even with the use of technology, is the fact that the A-pillars are pretty large. I think this has been done for safety features, but when it comes to driving, and if you're going around, let's say, small roads and ones that have got, let's say, roundabouts, you really do have to be peeking around the A-pillar, be it at the front or at the rear, to make sure there's no cyclists or, let's say, motorbikes coming. Cars are a little bit easier to see, but even then, at a distance, you might still miss it. If it's a smaller sized vehicle and you are going at speed, for example, you might not actually see it. Now, on the subject of the A-pillars, as we're just on the motorway and going to be pulling into Tesla right now, I should say that there's no traditional blind spot monitoring system. There is via the infotainment system, and it will play some chimes if you are approaching a vehicle or you've put on your indicator on a motorway. It'll show up a red line, but there's no, let's say, orange indicator which pops up within your inner side of your side view mirrors to indicate there's a vehicle beside you. So just worth bearing in mind that it might take some getting used to, specifically if you're accustomed to that. Or of course you can do it the traditional way where you look over your shoulder and make sure there's no cars out there before you are taking a maneuver. And so this all leads me on to my verdict, and quite frankly I was a little skeptical getting into the Model 3 review, because there's a lot of Tesla fans out there that very much paint the vehicle in a positive light, or indeed the brand, or even its CEO Elon Musk, which is quite humorous on Twitter, should I say. Now, for someone who's quite impartial, I'm someone who's looking for a great vehicle. And in this respect, the Model 3 actually quite surprised me. Not only because it's quite technologically advanced in comparison to some of its competitors, but also because it does the fundamentals of what an EV should do. Give you fantastic all-electric range and give you a vehicle that's very fun to drive, given its weight distribution, or indeed because you get that instant amount of torque. In my opinion, it's the best electric vehicle should you be able to afford it, and as a result it gets our Best Buy award. Of course, that's just my opinion and thoughts about it, so be intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe and hit that bell notification if you want to keep up with the channel, and of course favourite and share if you feel this video will be helpful to a family and friend making an informed purchasing decision. Alright, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, take care of yourselves and goodbye.